February 18, 1977. Lagos, Nigeria. The sun was bright that morning, but inside Kalakita Republic, screams tore through the air. Hundreds of soldiers stormed the compound, smashing doors, beating men, dragging women by their hair. Fela Anikulapo Kuti, the loudest voice against Nigeria's brutal military rulers, was dragged across the ground, his bones breaking under rifle butts. Upstairs, his 77-year-old mother, Funmilayo, a respected activist, was thrown out of a second-story window. That day was not just a raid. It was a message: no one could challenge the state and survive. But instead of silence, Fela's saxophone screamed louder. His music became a weapon. His story, one of blood, pain, and defiance. This is a true story. Subscribe now to Mr. Playback series and watch till the end. It was October 15, 1938, in Abeokuta, Nigeria, when Olufala Olusegun Oludetan Ransom Kuti was born. His family was no ordinary Nigerian family. His father, Reverend Israel Oludetan Ransom Kuti, was a preacher, teacher, and school principal. His mother, Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, was a fearless political activist, the first Nigerian woman to drive a car, and one who openly confronted colonial authorities. Fela grew up in a home of discipline and rebellion, where faith, education, and resistance intertwined. From the start, his path was clear: he was never going to be ordinary. As a boy, he loved mischief. He mocked rules, questioned authority, and hated silence. At Abeokuta Grammar School, where his father was principal, Fela was often punished for breaking discipline. But he had something no one could punish away: a deep love for rhythm. Music ran in the Kuti family. His brothers studied medicine, but Fela wanted sound. In the 1950s, while Nigeria was pushing toward independence from Britain, Fela was already dreaming of something greater: music that could shake walls, challenge leaders, and give people hope. In 1958, his parents sent him to London to study medicine. Instead, Fela enrolled at the Trinity College of Music, choosing trumpet and theory over scalpels and stethoscopes. He fell in love with jazz, Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis. But even as he learned Western music, Africa called to him. By the 1960s, Nigeria was independent but deeply unstable. Coups, assassinations, and military rulers shook the young nation. Fela returned home with his band, Kula Lobitos. He blended high life, jazz, funk, and Yoruba rhythms, creating a new sound. A sound that was raw, rebellious, and distinctly African. Afrobeat was not just music. It was energy. A wall of drums, horns, chants, and hypnotic rhythm. It was impossible to sit still when Fela played. But more than rhythm, Afrobeat carried words. His lyrics were political fire, mocking generals, exposing corruption, and calling out injustice. By the early 1970s, Nigeria was under a brutal military dictatorship led by General Yakubu Gowon, and later by General Olusegun Obasanjo. Soldiers ruled with guns, corruption ran deep, and silence was demanded. But Fela refused to be silent. He renamed his home and studio Kalakita Republic, declaring it an independent nation, free from Nigeria's corrupt state. He built a commune of musicians, dancers, family, and activists. Every night, people gathered at the Shrine, his nightclub, where Fela performed marathon shows lasting until dawn. The government saw him as a threat. His songs like Zombie mocked soldiers as mindless pawns, and authority stealing accused leaders of robbing the nation blind. And in a country where speaking against power could get you jailed or killed, Fela sang louder. The military responded with brutality. Police raided Kalakita repeatedly. Fela was beaten, arrested, and jailed over 200 times in his life. But each time, he came back stronger. His saxophone wailed like a weapon, his lyrics cut deeper, and his defiance only grew. He openly smoked marijuana, married 27 wives in one day, and declared himself the voice of the voiceless. But in 1977, the government decided enough was enough. By 1976, Fela Kuti had become more than a musician. He was a political force. His commune, Fela Kuti Republic, was buzzing with life. Inside its walls, musicians rehearsed, women danced, children played, and activists plotted resistance. Fela called it a nation of its own, separate from Nigeria's corrupt system. From Fela Kuti, he broadcast his resistance. His nightclub, the Shrine, became a temple of truth, where thousands gathered to hear his sermons through music. His lyrics attacked the military government without mercy. His hit, Zombie, ridiculed soldiers as brainless robots who followed orders blindly. Zombie no go think, unless you tell 'em to think. Zombie no go walk, unless you tell 'em to walk. The song was a direct insult to the Nigerian army. Crowds cheered, but the generals boiled with rage. The government had tolerated Fela's boldness for years, but Zombie crossed the line. He had mocked their very foundation, the military. And dictators do not forgive humiliation. February 18, 1977. That morning, Lagos was restless. Trucks filled with soldiers rumbled toward Fela Kuti Republic. Eyewitnesses later said they numbered over 1,000 men. They were not coming for a small arrest. They were coming for destruction. Inside Fela Kuti, life was normal. Musicians tuned instruments, women cooked, children ran across the compound. Fela, dressed in his usual open shirt and tight trousers, was preparing for the day. Then came the sound, the thunder of boots, the crack of rifles against metal gates. The army had arrived. They stormed the compound like a flood. Soldiers smashed doors, set rooms ablaze, dragged people out by their hair. Men were beaten with rifle butts until bones broke. Women were stripped and raped. Fela himself was targeted, soldiers pounced on him, dragging him across the ground, kicking, beating, and whipping until his body bled. The Fela Kuti Republic was burning. Among those inside was Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, Fela's 77-year-old mother. She was not just a mother. She was one of Nigeria's most respected activists, a woman who had fought British colonialists and demanded women's rights in an era when women's voices were silenced. The soldiers found her upstairs. Without hesitation, they threw her out of a second-story window. She landed on the ground with a sickening crack. She would never recover. Months later, she died from her injuries. It was more than an attack on Fela. It was an attack on his very soul. By the time the soldiers were done, Fela Kuti Republic was reduced to rubble. The commune was burned, the people broken. But the government had made one mistake. They thought by destroying Fela Kuti, they would silence Fela. They were wrong. As Fela recovered from his injuries, he planned his revenge, not with guns, but with music. In one of the most dramatic acts of defiance in African history, Fela built a coffin. On it, he wrote the name of his mother. Then, surrounded by his band and supporters, he carried that coffin through the streets of Lagos, straight to Dodon Barracks, the residence of Nigeria's head of state, General Olusegun Obasanjo. He placed the coffin at the gates of the dictator's home. It was a message, carved in grief and rage: this blood is on your hands. The government was stunned. The world watched. And Fela's music, songs like Coffin for Head of State and Sorrow, Tears, and Blood, turned his personal tragedy into a rallying cry for millions. This is not just music. This is war without guns. If you're gripped by this story of defiance, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now to Mr. A Playback series and stay with us as the battle between one man and a nation grows darker. The raid broke Fela's body, but not his spirit. He began walking Lagos in his underwear, scars visible, daring the government to look at what they had done. He wrote music with sharper venom. He renamed his band Egypt 80, linking his struggle with the struggles of ancient African civilizations. But the government would not stop. Year after year, soldiers raided the shrine. Police arrested Fela on fabricated charges, from currency smuggling to drug possession. He spent time in prison, beaten, humiliated. Amnesty International would later name him a prisoner of conscience. Yet every time they tried to bury him, he rose again, horn in hand, music pouring out like fire. Fela was no saint. His personal life was chaotic. In 1978, he married 27 women in a single day, dancers, singers, and supporters from his commune. He called it an act of African tradition, though critics called it reckless. He openly smoked marijuana, challenging the conservative norms of Nigerian society. He preached about African pride, black consciousness, and spiritual freedom, but his lifestyle scandalized many. Still, through all the chaos, the music never stopped. Each performance was a sermon, a rebellion, a prophecy. Crowds filled the shrine not just for entertainment, but for truth. By the 1980s, Fela Anikulapo Kuti had become more than a Nigerian icon. He was a global voice for resistance. His music spread beyond Africa, blasting through radios in Europe, America, and Asia. Journalists called him the Black President, a man who ruled no country yet commanded the loyalty of millions. Concerts in London, Berlin, and New York drew massive crowds. Western stars like Stevie Wonder, Paul McCartney, and the Talking Heads admired him. Yet, while other African musicians softened their music to appeal to foreign markets, Fela refused to compromise. He sang in Pidgin English, a language simple enough for Africans from different countries to understand. He wanted every poor man, every market woman, every student, every taxi driver to hear his message. And his message was always the same: corruption kills. Military power is a disease. Africa must be free. In 1984, Nigeria came under the rule of Major General Muhammadu Buhari. His government launched a so-called war against indiscipline. For Fela, it was nothing but another excuse for military oppression. That year, Fela prepared to tour the United States with his band, Egypt 80. At Lagos Airport, soldiers arrested him. They accused him of illegally attempting to smuggle currency. The charges were weak, but the government wanted him silenced. The trial was a farce. The judge later admitted he had been pressured to jail Fela. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Prison was brutal. He was beaten, starved, and kept under constant surveillance. But even behind bars, Fela's spirit could not be broken. Amnesty International adopted him as a prisoner of conscience, and international campaigns demanded his release. In 1986, after 2 years, Fela was finally freed when a new regime came to power. He emerged thin, scarred, but unshaken. And his first words to journalists were defiant. They can never kill music. They can never kill truth. Upon release, Fela returned to the shrine. He took the stage, saxophone in hand, body swaying as the horns of Egypt 80 roared behind him. His songs now carried even deeper fire. Beasts of No Nation targeted not just Nigerian leaders, but global powers like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, whom he accused of supporting African dictators. The lyrics cut like knives. Many leaders as you see them na animals in human skin. The audience erupted. For them, Fela was more than an entertainer. He was their voice, their champion, their rebel king. But even legends are human. By the 1990s, Fela's health was failing. He refused modern medicine, trusting instead in traditional healing. His once powerful body grew thinner, weaker. Rumors swirled that he had contracted AIDS, though he denied it. Still, he continued performing. Night after night, even when his energy faded, he would take the stage, blowing his saxophone with the little strength he had left. His music was his life, and he refused to let silence win. On August 2, 1997, the world received the news Fela Anikulapo Kuti was dead. He was 58 years old. Doctors confirmed he died from complications related to AIDS. His death shook Nigeria like an earthquake. More than 1 million people flooded the streets of Lagos for his funeral. They came from every corner of society: students, workers, musicians, market women, politicians, foreigners. His body was laid in a glass coffin, and as the crowds wept and sang, it was clear Fela was not just a man. He was a movement. Fela's legacy did not end with his death. His children carried his torch. Fela Kuti and Storey Kuti continued his music, using Afrobeat to challenge injustice. His nightclub, The Shrine, still stands, now run by his family, where new generations gather to celebrate freedom through music. Globally, Fela's influence only grew stronger. Afrobeat inspired hip-hop, jazz, and electronic music. Stars like Beyoncé, Jay-Z, and Kendrick Lamar have referenced him. Broadway created the award-winning musical Fela, introducing his story to audiences worldwide. But beyond the music, his greatest legacy is resistance. He proved that art can be a weapon sharper than any sword. That truth can outlive dictators. That one man with a saxophone can terrify an entire government. This is not fiction. This is history. Fela Kuti's life was a true story of courage, music, and defiance. He did not fight with guns. He fought with rhythm, with words, with the power of his people. And though governments tried to silence him, his voice still echoes today. Picture Lagos, 1997. A sea of people. The air heavy with grief and song. A glass coffin surrounded by millions of mourners. And above them all, the sound of Afrobeat, blasting from speakers, carrying Fela's spirit into eternity. A man who dared to call soldiers zombies. A man who carried a coffin to a dictator's doorstep. A man who declared his home a republic, only to see it burned. Fela Anikulapo Kuti. The man who fought a nation. His story is a warning, and a promise. Power can crush bodies, but it cannot crush truth. If you believe the world must remember stories like this, subscribe now to @Mr. Playback series. And tell us in the comments, do you think one voice can still challenge corrupt power today?